In November of 1256, Rukunddin Kursha, leader of the Order of Assassins, walked out of the fortress of Maimundiz, one of the last assassin strongholds in northern Persia. The fortress was besieged by the Mongols, led by Hulagu Khan, brother of Emperor Manka Khan. Kursha was on his way to surrender. People were starving. Weeks of bombardment by Mongol catapults had pummeled the fortress into submission. The era of the Nizari, an era marked by targeted assassinations of influential leaders throughout Persia, was coming to an end. But not before Mongol wrath would descend upon those who refused to surrender. Welcome back to Nutty History. In this episode, we're taking assassins, also known as the Nizari Ismailis, were a Shia assassin sect that was considered heretical by most Sunni and Shia Muslims because of their beliefs surrounding the succession of the leaders of the faith after the Prophet Muhammad. By 1150, they moved from Egypt up to Syria and Iran and took control of a string of castles in the remote mountains. The Nizari trained young men in the dark arts of assassination. They were trained to lurk in the shadows, infiltrate enemy strongholds, and target specific leaders with deadly precision, and inflict fatal wounds with their trademark daggers. Despite their relatively small numbers, the Order of Assassins was able to exert an impressive amount of influence throughout Persia through their targeted assassinations. One such hit was on the leader of the Seljuks, Nizam al-Mulk. After he was taken out by an assassin disguised as a Sufi mystic, the Seljuk Empire fell into disarray and eventually collapsed, setting off a series of dominoes that would eventually bring the Mongols to the doorsteps of the Nizari fortresses. To pull off such hits, Nizaris would spend months and months collecting data on their target in disguise. With the Seljuk Empire in tatters, the Khwarezmian Empire rose in its place. It lasted a mere 150 years, however, because in 1219, the Khwarezmi Shah disrespected Genghis Khan and the Mongols by reportedly fatally punishing Mongol members of a diplomatic envoy sent from Mongolia. The Great Khan was infuriated and briefly abandoned his campaign against the Qin in the east to focus fully on destroying Khwarezmians. In just 2 years, the Khwarezmian Empire was completely annihilated. It was a brutal and unforgiving siege of the country. The Mongols were sympathetic and treated kindly those they defeated, as long as they surrendered admirably and didn't do anything the Mongols considered dishonorable. This wasn't the case for the Khwarezmians. They put up a fight after disrespecting the Great Khan by destroying his envoy. The might of nearly the entire Mongol army descended upon Central Asia and Persia. Genghis Khan, his sons Tului, Ogadai, and Chagatai, and his most decorated generals Zeb and Subutai burned through the region, laying siege to city after city. On the battlefield, the Khwarezmians were no match for the skilled horsemanship of the Mongols, whose unconventional swarm tactics, their ability to shoot arrows with deadly accuracy while galloping full speed on horseback, and technologies made from gunpowder that were catapulted into enemy lines with devastating effect. Seeing the Mongols at their doorstep, the Nizari were worried. They were still relatively safe in their secluded mountain forts, but it seemed that it wouldn't last for long. In 1221, just after the defeat of the Khwarezmian Empire, the Nizari leader Hassan III sent a delegation to meet Genghis Khan in Balkh, a city in modern Afghanistan. They were ignored, though. It seemed the Great Khan had bigger things going on than entertaining the company of a small sect that appeared to be no great threat. Hassan III would die shortly after. His successor and son, Ala ad-Din Muhammad, was left with a lot of work to do. There was the Mongol threat for sure, but there was also the Sunni threat. As a Shia sect in a largely Sunni region, the Nizari Ismailis and Ala ad-Din realized they needed to make allies. They began practicing taqiyya, or basically pretending to accept certain Sunni ideas and practices out of survival and to gain allies. However, the Mongols knew this. They were slowly becoming aware of the shadowy presence of the Order of Assassins in the region, and they worked with other Sunni leaders, the ones still left alive anyway, to try and build alliances against the assassins. When Gayat Khan, the third Khagan emperor of the Mongols, was inaugurated in 1246, Ala ad-Din again sent an envoy to curry favor with the new Great Khan. Again, it didn't work. Gayat responded by sending forces into the Nizari stronghold of Alamut, but Gayat died just 2 years later, abandoning the campaign against the Nizari and leaving a power vacuum that wouldn't be filled for another 3 years when Manka Khan entered the picture. By 1251, Manka Khan was very aware of the Order of Assassins. According to many sources, they had already taken out a powerful Mongol general named Chagatai Korchi. Mongol generals and leaders in Persia were sending letters back to Mongolia complaining that they had to sleep with armor on just to feel safe from any potential assassins. When a report came back that some 400 assassins had been foiled in a plot to take out Manka Khan, the Mongols had had enough and went to exterminate the Nizari. In 1253, Manka sent his brother Hulagu into the Persian mountains to wipe out the Nizari Ismaili. Hulagu took his time getting into Nizari territory, first sending a general named Kitbuka to lay the groundwork for assault. Some estimate that he commanded as many as 300,000 troops. Other estimates put the size of the army at just 10,000. Kitbuka took several Nizari forts in Quistan in the east, and then he set his sights on Gurkha, one of the main Nizari fortresses. After a lengthy siege, the Nizari there were able to withstand the attack, and even slipped out in the middle of the night to end 100 Mongols before retreating back to the safety of the fortress. Kitbuka eventually gave up and moved elsewhere. Gurkha and its impressive defenses would resist the Mongols for the next 17 years. In the meantime, Hulagu was slowly making his way through Central Asia to meet up with General Kitbuka. Along the way, he flattened entire cities and forged alliances with Turkish and Tazik lords in eastern Persia, who, either out of fear or respect, sent supplies and troops to fight under the Mongolian flag. By 1255, the Nizari leader, Ala ad-Din, reportedly gave up hope. He fell into what is best described as a deep state of melancholia. He was unwilling to negotiate with the Mongols, and seeing the imminent demise of their sect, other Nizari leaders began to plot against him, hoping to overthrow him and install his son, Rukn-Din Korsha. Korsha was more sympathetic to negotiations with the Mongols, though it's not certain whether or not he played a part in the plot. In December 1255, Ala ad-Din died under mysterious circumstances. Was he perhaps the victim of one of the final assassinations carried out by the order? One that ironically was an inside job? And was it one carried out by his own son? We may never know. What we do know is that Korsha succeeded his father as the leader of the Nizari. Korsha sent a message to Hulagu, who by this point had most of Nizari territory in near submission, despite the fact that several fortresses remained stubbornly intact and able to withstand the Mongol sieges. The message proclaimed the Nizari desire for Il. Il was a Mongol term that meant both peace and absolute submission. Hulagu sent word back to Korsha that he would accept and forgive the belligerent resistance of his father, but only if Korsha destroyed the remaining Nizari fortresses. Korsha asked for time to do this, but Hulagu was tired of waiting. Mongol forces besieged the fortress of Maimamdiz, where Korsha was holed up in hiding. But with resources depleted and disease rampaging throughout the stronghold, Korsha finally capitulated and surrendered to the Mongols. Yet, there were still Nizari who refused to accept their leader's surrender. The fortresses of Gurkha, Lamsar, and the main Nizari stronghold of Alamut held out. Slowly but surely, though, Mongol might prevail. Korsha had seemingly lost control of the remaining strongholds, who refused to accept the surrender their leader had agreed upon with Hulagu. In a last-ditch effort, Korsha journeyed to the Mongolian capital of Karakoram to ask the great Khan Manka for leniency. Manka sent him away, uncaring and unpersuaded. On his way back from the Mongolian capital, Korsha and his entourage were taken out by a Mongol detachment. It was written that he and his followers were kicked to a pulp and then put to the sword, and of him and his stock no trace was left, and he and his kindred became but a tale on men's lips and a tradition in the world. The perceived disrespect of the Nizari holdouts had terrible consequences. To the Mongols, the promise of Il had been broken. They proceeded to wipe the Nizari off the face of the earth. Some reports say that more than 100,000 were ruthlessly terminated. The Mongols were on their way towards Baghdad, where they would create their great Ilkhanate and control all of Persia, on their way to becoming the largest contiguous empire in the history of the world. The Order of Assassins, meanwhile, became but a tale on men's lips, a small sect that punched well above their weight, but in the end, doomed to fade into obscurity.